So now, we will tackle about the history of the art in the Renaissance period. Renaissance is the rebirth of mankind and civilization. It means that Renaissance gave birth to the modern era. In this era, human beings first began to think of themselves as individuals. In the early Middle Ages, people had been happy to see themselves simply as parts of a greater whole. For example, as members of a great family, trade guild, nation, or church. This communal consciousness of the Middle Ages gradually gave way to the individual consciousness of the Renaissance. So what does it mean by Renaissance? Renaissance is the revival of European art and literature under the influence of classical models in the 14th or to 16th centuries. From French word, Renaissance means re, which means back or again, and naissance means birth, which means being reborn or rebirth. So what is reborn or rebirth? Reborn means to be born again. It also means to generate or revive. It is used to describe the time that followed the Middle Ages. The Renaissance was a time of new thought and advancement. New ways of thinking developed in the areas of art, architecture, science, philosophy, politics. The Renaissance period was also the era of great creativity in literature, sculpture, and painting. It was the time when people rediscovered the glories of ancient Greece and Rome. So when does Renaissance occur? Renaissance occurred at the end of the Middle Ages. Before Renaissance, people only concerned about death of which wants to save his soul in the next, like God was the center of everything. During the Renaissance period, people thought less of death and more to life, thus making them eager to find out all they could, like promoting learning, like man already knew how to write, paint, sculpt, and delve in architecture, and also other aspects of life. So now, let's proceed to the origins of Renaissance. Renaissance began in Florence, Italy in the 14th century. It is the period from the end of the 15th century has become known as the High Renaissance, when Venice and Rome began to share Florence's importance. This is when Raphael, Leonardo da Vinci, and Michelangelo were active. Until the Renaissance thinking spread to the rest of Europe from the early 16th century and was influenced for the next 100 years until now. So let's proceed to the Renaissance art movement. This movement originated in Italy and spanned from the 14th to the 17th century. The Italian Renaissance was noted for four things. First is a reverent revival of classical Greek or Roman art forms and styles, which influenced by the atmosphere of the Greek and Roman myths like god and goddesses. It also painted in maturity and religious pictures, though in a different way, unlike the earlier painters. As you can see in the earlier painters, they were not content with painting the human body, unlike the Renaissance period or painting, they used whole body. Mostly, the Renaissance painters tried to bring out its beauty along with the sculptures. The second art movement that must noted is the mastery of linear perspective or depth in painting and the use of 3D. The Renaissance painters used the law of perspective. So what is perspective? Perspective is based on the fact that we have two eyes. We therefore see objects as defined by two lines of sight that converge at a distance, the painter's vanishing point on the horizon. Since those two lines an acute angle, plane geometry can show the size and place that an object at any distance was given to the painting to make it appear as if it looks in life or in 3D form. For the painting that looks like real, it consists of three parts: drawing, measurement, and color. One of the uses of color is to create aerial perspective. A light blue-gray makes distant objects in the painting look hazy as they appear to the eye owing to the thickness of the atmosphere. And if we combine the two parts, it can create the illusion of depth, the three-dimensional reality on a flat surface. It also consists of mathematical concept, which if you observe that object seems to get smaller as they move farther away. So as makita nimo sa kasagaran sa painting sa Renaissance is naa siya vanishing point which imo makita nga mura jud siya tinuod. And the third one that must noted in the art movement is the naturalistic realism of its faces and figures. One of the example of this is the School of Athens, which is painted by Raphael Santi. In this painting, people are shown moving, talking, and interacting with one another, and that shows realism or natural. And the last one is the emphasis on circular objects. It means that the art or the painting has no religious reference points and in fact oblivious to organized religion. And having an aesthetic appeal in a non-religious context, it neither denies. During the Renaissance period, there are three great and famous artists, which are Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, and Raphael Santi. Leonardo da Vinci is greatly admired as a scientist, an academic, and an inventor. He is most famous of his achievements as the painter of several Renaissance masterpieces, works like Mona Lisa, The Last Supper, and Vitruvian Man. Among the most famous works created by Da Vinci is the small portrait titled The Mona Lisa, known for the elusive smile of the woman's face, brought about by the fact that Da Vinci subtly shadowed the corners of the mouth and eyes so that the exact nature of the smile cannot be determined. And also, one of the famous artworks that created by Da Vinci is The Last Supper. As you can see in the painting, it depicts the last meal shared by Jesus and the 12 apostles, where he announces that one of them will betray him. When Leonardo da Vinci finished the painting, it was acclaimed as a masterpiece of design. Leonardo drew the Vitruvian Man, known also as the proportions of the human body, according to Vitruvius, in 1492. The piece depicts an idealized nude male standing with a square and a circle. Leonardo chose to depict the man with 4 legs and 4 arms, allowing him to strike poses simultaneously. The next great and famous artist during the Renaissance period is Michelangelo Buonarroti. Michelangelo is an Italian Renaissance painter, sculptor, architect, poet, and engineer. He is the best documented artist of the 16th century. His most well-known works are The Creation of Adam, Battle of the Centaurs, Madonna of the Stairs, and Pieta. One of his famous artwork is The Creation of Adam. The Creation of Adam is one of his greatest paintings that talks about the vision of the sublimity of God and the potential ability of man, unprecedented and rivaled in the entire history of visual art. The Creation of Adam has become the most memorable part of the series of frescoes on the ceiling. Another artwork that Michelangelo created is the Battle of Centaurs. It was sculpted by Michelangelo in 1492. The dynamic position of each character gives the sculpture a vigorous mood, which it is full of activity and energy. Another artwork that Michelangelo created is Madonna of the Stairs. It is one of the famous sculptures made by Michelangelo when he was just 17 years old. As you can see, her gaze is not upon the child, so too does our gaze wander across the entire image. The last artwork of Michelangelo that I will present is the Pieta. But that Michelangelo is not the first person who painted Pieta. There are lots of artists who paint Pieta as well. But Michelangelo's interpretation of the Pieta was far different from those previously created by other artists. As you can see, this famous work of art depicts the body of Jesus on the lap of his mother Mary after the crucifixion. At the same time, Christ's face does not reveal signs of the Passion. Why? Because Michelangelo did not want his version of the Pieta to represent death, but rather to show the religious visions of abandonment and the serene face of the Son. Thus, the representation of the communion between man and God by the sanctification through Christ. The last famous artist that I will present during the Renaissance period is Raphael Santi. Raphael Santi was an Italian painter and architect of the High Renaissance, celebrated for the perfection and grace of his painting and drawings. Raphael Santi is also a traveling artist but spent most of his time in Florence. One of the famous artwork that was created by Raphael Santi is the painting of Coronation of the Virgin. The main actions of Raphael's work occur in two related sites. One is in terrestrial and the other in heaven. As you can see in the painting, just above the coronation, the Virgin has been crowned while the angels are playing their musical instruments. The two essential scenes are the giving of the girdle to Saint Thomas that is represented in the lower section and the crowning of the Virgin that occupies the upper section of the painting. Another artwork that Raphael created is painting of Marriage of the Virgin. This painting clearly shows the marriage of Saint Joseph and the Virgin Mary. Another artwork that Raphael created is the painting of Pope Julius II. The artist's portrayal was astonishingly realistic. As you can see in the painting, his face shows one of sorrows and gloom. He also appears to be inattentive and withdrawn. The painting was expected to depict a powerful person yet displays him with vulnerability. Another artwork that Raphael created is the painting of an allegory or visions of a night. As you can observe, the painting clearly shows a gentleman sleeping under a tree flanked by two ladies. One lady is holding a sword and a book while the other is holding a flower. It is believed that the gentleman is representing Scipio Africanus, the Roman hero who is in the dream with two choices between the virtue and the pleasure. And last but not the least, one of the Raphael's famous artwork is the painting of the School of Athens. Raphael painted a fantastic temple in the space of the ancient philosophers and scientists, which Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Pythagoras, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo Buonarroti, and lots of the artists and scientists' figures were painted inside Raphael's artwork. The School of Athens gave the impression of unity. The next topic will be discussed by KAYE. If you have any question or clarification regarding about my topic, just leave a message in the comment section. Thank you.
As a recap for the history of Renaissance, the word Renaissance is derivative from the French word for rebirth, signifying how Europe came out of the Dark Ages, reawakening in art, culture, science, technology, and music. Now moving on, let us tackle about Renaissance painting of Masaccio. As we go along, we will know who is Masaccio in the Renaissance period. But before that, Renaissance painting was developed in 15th century Florence when artists began to reject the flatness of Gothic painting and strive toward greater naturalism. So during the 15th century, Florence was the birthplace of Renaissance painting, which rejected the flatness and stylized nature of Gothic art in order to focus on naturalistic representations of the human body and landscapes. Many other important techniques commonly associated with Renaissance painting developed in Florence during the first half of the 15th century, including the use of realistic proportions, foreshortening, sfumato, and chiaroscuro. Other important techniques developed in Florence during the first half of the 15th century include the use of realistic proportions, foreshortening. This is the artistic effect of shortening lines in a drawing to create the illusion of depth. Sfumato. This is the blurring of sharp outlines by subtle and gradual blending to give the illusion of three-dimensionality. And the last one is a chiaroscuro. This is the contrast between light and dark to convey a sense of depth. The most widely credited artist with first pioneering the techniques I mentioned earlier in the 15th century Florence was Masaccio. He was the first great painter of the Quattrocento period of Italian Renaissance. However, he was deeply influenced by both Giotto's early innovations in solidity of form and naturalism and Brunelleschi's formalized use of perspective in architecture and sculpture. Masaccio is best known for his frescoes in the Brancacci Chapel, in which he employed techniques of linear perspective, such as the vanishing point for the first time. The vanishing point is the point in a perspective drawing at which parallel lines receding from an observer seem to converge, and had a profound influence on other artists despite the brevity of his career. The painting portrays the Tribute Money, fresco in the Brancacci Chapel in Santa Maria del Carmine, Florence in 1425. The Tribute Money is one of Masaccio's most famous frescoes from the Brancacci Chapel. This is where Jesus and his apostles are depicted as neoclassical archetypes. The shadows of the figures fall away from the chapel window, as if the figures are lit by it. This is an added stroke of verisimilitude and shows Masaccio's innovative genius. So the Renaissance period does not only focus on art, but rather, in general, it has a lot of characteristics. So the following that I will mention are the characteristics of Renaissance. We have the printing press, intellectual movement, arts, music, literature, society and economics, religion, geography, and science. The printing press is where the demand for perfect reproductions of text and the renewed focus in studying them helped trigger one of the biggest discoveries in the whole of human history, which is printing with movable type. In intellectual movement, evolution of Renaissance humanism as a method of thinking. Renaissance humanism was an ethical theory and practice that emphasized reason, scientific inquiry, and human fulfillment in the natural world. However, in arts, both classical and Renaissance art focused on human beauty and nature. People, even when in religious works, were depicted living life and showing emotion. Perspective and light and shadow techniques improved and paintings looked more three-dimensional and realistic. The most famous patrons were the Medici family in Florence, who supported the arts for much of the 15th and 16th centuries. The Medici family supported artists such as Michelangelo, Botticelli, Leonardo da Vinci, and Raphael. The Renaissance music was characterized by its humanist traits. Composers read classical treatises on music and aimed to create music that would touch listeners emotionally. They began to incorporate lyrics more dramatically into compositions and considered music and poetry to be closely related, according to the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Renaissance literature was characterized by humanist themes and a return to classical ideals of tragedy and comedy. Shakespeare's works, especially Hamlet, are good examples of these. Themes like human agency, life's non-religious meanings, and the true nature of man are embraced, and Hamlet is an educated Renaissance man. In society and economics, the most prevalent societal change during the Renaissance was the fall of feudalism and the rise of a capitalist market economy. Increased trade and the labor shortage caused by the Black Death gave rise to something of a middle class. Workers could not demand wages and good living conditions, and so serfdom ended. However, in religion, the Catholic Church influences was waning as the 15th century began. The re-emergence of classical text and the rise in Renaissance humanism changed society's approach to religion and the authority of the papacy. Perhaps most important, the invention of the printing press allowed for the dissemination of the Bible in languages other than Latin. Ordinary people were now able to read and learn the lessons of Scripture, leading to the evangelical movement. In geography, thirsty to learn more about the world and eager to improve trade routes, explorers sailed off to chart new lands. Columbus discovered the New World in 1492, and Ferdinand Magellan became the first person to successfully circumnavigate the globe in the early 1500s. However, in science, as scholars studied classical texts, they resurrected the ancient Greek belief that creation was constructed around perfect laws and reasoning. There was an escalation in the study of astronomy, anatomy, and medicine, geography, alchemy, mathematics, and architecture as the ancients studied them. Moving on to the influence of the Renaissance. Writing in the 1430s, Matteo Palmieri of Florence celebrated this new age so full of hope and promise, with a greater collection of nobly gifted souls than the world had seen in 1,000 years. Like others of his day, Palmieri believed he was living in a special time, a period of tremendous intellectual and artistic creativity inspired by the ancient world. That era came to be known as the Renaissance, and ever since Palmieri's day, historians have discussed its causes, characteristics, and importance. In the traditional view, the Renaissance affected every area of human activity and knowledge. From art to zoology, it transformed Europe and eventually the rest of the world. In addition, it left a legacy that still shapes many aspects of modern life. An example for these were the education and history, art and science, popular imagination and culture. The influential artists on the Renaissance period were Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, William Shakespeare, and many more. Let us now tackle about the importance of Renaissance. The vibrant period of the European Renaissance era is famous worldwide. Most people will just think of the famed paintings of this era, but the Renaissance was much more than great art, laying out the foundation of the European age of exploration, which led to Europe's global power. Its big-name discoveries, masterpieces, developments have gone down in history as some of the greatest creations of Earth. Remembered and marked throughout the history as a significant period of change, it appears to stand out against the ages. Ultimately, the answer to this can be seen in the art, literature, and politics of the time, which has influenced the way we live today. The Renaissance also saw within it a period known as the Age of Discovery, where voyagers launched expeditions to travel the globe, discovering whole new shipping routes to the Americas, India, and the Far East, influencing our ideas further, including religion, of course. To end this, the Renaissance was a time of transition from the ancient world to the modern and provided the foundation for the birth of the Age of Enlightenment. The developments in science, art, philosophy, and trade, as well as technological advancements like the printing press, left lasting impressions on society and set the stage for many elements of our modern culture.